It doesn't matter the size of the company. If anything, I would say the bigger the company, the bigger the problem, the more it's magnified.
Welcome back to another episode of Built to Finish. Today's guest works with companies that are growing but not operating the way they could. Because growth doesn't fix problems, it exposes them. And what used to work at one stage quietly breaks at the next. What makes her perspective different is that it's grounded in real operational experience, not just theory. She's worked inside businesses, alongside founders and leadership teams, and family owned and run businesses, helping them navigate complexity, misalignment, and the invisible friction that slows everything down. Today, we're going to talk about family dynamics in a business, leadership under pressure, operational clarity, decision making, and what it really takes to build something that grows and works. She is a strategist, operator, and trusted advisor to founders and leadership teams. Dr. Donna Marino, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm going to start taking you with me to tell everybody what I do. You said that so beautifully.
Yeah, very welcome. I'm happy to record that for you for reuse at no extra charge.
Okay, thanks.
I've got a bunch of questions for you. We're going to just bounce around different topics.
Sounds great.
Let me start with different size companies. You've worked with companies ranging from like $10 million in annual sales to over $1 billion. Are the emotional dynamics surprisingly similar regardless of company size?
Yes. Family dynamics are family dynamics, and businesses run into the same things, the old stories or expectations, the unspoken rules that are from the family that move to the business. And often in that growth, they're functioning from tribal knowledge instead of documentation. So the growing pains and the dynamics, it doesn't matter the size of the company. If anything, I would say the bigger the company, the bigger the problem, the more it's magnified, like you said,
Sure.
with growth. But otherwise, really, it's the same stuff.
Okay. So what's different psychologically about leading a family business versus a non-family business?
Part of it is when you know someone for so long, you start to play name that tune, right? They've always been like this. They've always been like that. And we tend to box people in. I think even in my own family, my brothers do not see me as Dr. Donna, right? I'm that little sister that was a pain in the neck and cried too much, So we have these different views of each other that don't necessarily translate well to working together in business. You just have so much history. Now, one of the things I like to do is teach them how to leverage that. Okay, you really know each other. How do you leverage each other's strengths? And how do you turn that knowing of each other and history into a strength instead of a weakness? They have to really rewrite their stories a lot. There's also a lot of breakdowns in communication. There's assumptions that they know what each other is thinking because they know me, they know this, they know that, and a lot of assumptions.
I'm sure. So I know succession planning is really important, and it's challenging in many companies, especially in family-run businesses. What do you think are some of the biggest mistakes that families make during succession planning?
There's a few things. One primarily is not talking about it, right? Not talking about it and making those assumptions. Another that I'm seeing a lot is the founders or the gen that's in charge won't leave. People are working longer, but instead of talking about it, they have an attitude of like, I'm going to die in my chair and then you get the company and you figure it out. I recently learned that at a family business conference, which I wasn't aware of this issue, that people have a belief that when they retire, they're going to die. And so they don't retire because they don't want to die. There's all this like identity attached to the business. And so there becomes this issue of, I don't know who I am without the business, so I'm not going to leave. And then I would say the third thing, which I see a lot transition between Gen 2 and Gen 3, is that Gen 3 is excited to come in and innovate and make change. And Gen 2 is like, wait a second, you have to learn the industry. And Gen 2 feels like insulted or unappreciated by what they've done and thinking like they want to change everything I've done. They don't think it's good enough. and Gen 3 feels frustrated and held back because they want to innovate, and you get this friction there. That that happens a lot, and that's a lot of work that I do with companies.
Thank you for reminding me why I never got family involved in my own business. I didn't I didn't want any of this drama.
Yes, yes.
So, a lot of founders think that growth will solve the problems, a lot of problems, right? Sales kills all ills. But you often see the opposite. Like, what actually breaks as companies scale?
One of the things is being too attached to the old way of doing things. Idea they think of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but it will break. And so they are tried and true. There is some merit to that, but they don't grow with the scale. And so, like with the tribal knowledge piece, but we don't want to write everything down, the resistance of we don't want to be corporate. And these
Hmm.
things that they need to do as they grow feel corporate to them. So, one of the things is helping them keep their family values and family culture as they grow and accept these changes that need to happen. One way I did that with one family was to come in and have their leadership team recreate their mission, vision, and values. It hadn't been looked at in like 100 years.
I'm sure.
They're a 100-year-old company, and getting them to sit down and really create this together collaboratively and then launch it to the rest of the company. So as they grow, they always come back to these values that keep that family feel and keep the culture even though they're growing.
How do you deal with the eye rolling that inevitably happens with a leadership team when a consultant is coming in to do mission, vision, values?
That's so funny. Um I'm a psychologist. I talk about it. I don't ignore it. Saw your eyes roll on that. Tell me what that's about, you know?
No, it's just like one of these terms, right, which is so overused, and very few companies, get it right, or the advisors that they utilize often don't have a proper methodology to guide a company through. So people
Mhm.
hear mission, vision, values, are like, "Oh my God, here we go again, another
Here
consultant
we go
coming
again.
in." Yep.
Yeah. You make it an energizing activity too, and you don't put words in their mouth. Your job is to pull what's already there out. And I'm not telling them what it is. I'll often say too, like, I'm not an expert in your industry, in your company. I'm not going to tell you what to do there. But what I am an expert in is people, right? And I'm going to help you engage with your people right and in understanding what motivates behavior and decision making and thought processes. So I'm not trying to take their role. I'm not a threat to them. I'm not going to challenge their expertise. I'm going to help them express it and work together to do that. So it's a different approach when you look at it as from psychology versus even just strategically. We have a strategy, it's keeping the culture, but it's not a process of it has to be XYZ and I'm going to give you this worksheet to do it. So,
And I totally get it. And again, I mean, I hate to be so cynical about it. I've seen a lot of these exercises go incredibly well, but again, they often start with the eye rolling. But it sounds like you know how to address that. So,
yeah,
look,
you gotta model the communication you want for them, and so you gotta call it out in the room and address those concerns that are often legitimate, right? You don't try to hide them or talk them out of it, but you acknowledge them, validate them, and then explain why this might be different, and you utilize their strengths to create it differently.
yep, yep, I get it. I get it. So let me give you a real world example and tell me how you would deal with this. Founder company, the founder is, like you said, is retired but doesn't really want to fully retire, and they kind of parachute in, parachute out whenever they want to. A little bit of a bull in a china shop, make a little bit of a mess, and then parachute out. And then the leadership team has to deal with what just occurred. How do you have a conversation with that type of founder to open their eyes to the, I guess, stress that they're creating within their own organization?
Absolutely. I can't even tell you how many times I deal with this? In an ideal situation, you're working with him before or her before that retirement, helping them get ready. Like, how are you going to spend your time? What's your identity like without the business? Helping process those emotions. There's an emotional part to succession that you have to address. So, ideally, you do it that way. But when you have this, I'm retired, but I'm in and out, you got to talk to them about what is the need that
Hmm.
is filling and how could you find it in another way. Also, talking with the family as a whole, is there a different role that could be fulfilling without being intrusive? Many times it could be, I don't know who I am without the business, but it could be a need to feel important, a need to feel valued. Lots of times the owners just want to know that, I'm going to say the kids, but it could be someone else, still want some advice for them, still value their knowledge. They don't always realize like the chaos they're causing. And I think sometimes people are afraid to have that conversation with them. They do respect that this was their business, and they do respect, like, they may still sign the checks or whatever that is, but collaborating together, like, how could this be different and more productive and healthy for everyone? But then the individual piece of, especially like, what need is this filling for you and how do we find it fulfilled in a different way?
Yeah, I'm sure that those are tough conversations to have, but they're so necessary because often folks
Yeah.
that do this don't realize the damage that they're causing.
Mhm, mhm. It's hard to let go of a family business. It becomes an extension of the family, you know? It's like sending your kid off to college.
I totally get it. How do you deal with morale issues, like in the family-run business, if the leadership team and other folks in the organization know that it's really only going to be family at the very top of this company? How do you deal with the morale issues that may cause from a career growth perspective for others?
You have to get ahead of it and acknowledge it and talk with your people about what their career ambitions are. Consider where they may be able to grow. Or in some cases, there isn't a guarantee that it'll be a family member. Right now, the kids are too young to decide. And there could be this gap. So the other piece is clarifying what might be available to them and what might not be. So it's so much of it. I know I say the same thing all the time, but so much of it comes to open communication and talking about what's, as you said, not being talked about.
Hey everyone, just a quick reminder that the Built to Finish podcast is brought to you by Accresis. Accresis have helped over 30 founders generate over $1 billion in wealth via strategic acquisitions or investor recapitalizations. If you're the owner of a middle market company and want to explore what a potential exit will look like for you so that you can finally realize the value of what you've been working so hard on, please do contact Accresis via the website accresis.com or hit me up on LinkedIn for more information at Stephen Pivnik. Now, back to the show. So you just mentioned kids are too young. So let's say the kids grow up and now you have siblings that are at the head of an organization. And I've seen this many times, either co-CEOs or co-presidents. How do you navigate a situation where they have different visions for the company? Have you been in that type of scenario?
Yeah. Yeah. I have to say that leaving siblings, more than one, having two siblings as co-presidents or co-CEOs is like where I see so much conflict. I know one company where they do it beautifully and it's great, but for most, sibling relationships are complicated for one.
Hmm.
And then you have two captains trying to steer the ship. And so often it's like, we don't want to favor someone, so we make this decision, and it's not the best decision for the company. So I tend to advise against that, especially a 50-50 split. I have a company right now. I only work with one person in the company, but they're in they're in court and they're fighting and they're this and they're that, and it's a mess. So some of it I just advise not even getting into that situation. Otherwise, I really do think they need a facilitator, a coach to help them have that conversation because it's so emotional. And
Hmm.
then like what parts of each person's vision do you like? Trying to find some common thread. Even it might be like we both want to honor the previous generation's wishes, and we may have different ideas of how to do that. So how do we make this alignment, this mutual purpose, and maybe build on that? And we are able to satisfy each a little bit, but at the end of the day, you agree you're honoring the previous generations. So the
Right.
common thread somewhere.
Yeah, you keep saying previous generation, and I'm very late to the game. I just recently started watching Yellowstone, so everything that you're saying, I'm kind of listening with a lens of the Yellowstone family, and it's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can see how some of those things play out, and some of them are like very exaggerated worst case like Succession, and others are a little more realistic, but you do see the spectrum, and there are very healthy family businesses, and there are ones that are struggling, but in general they're healthy, and there are those disasters too.
Yep, like Yellowstone. For
Yeah.
anybody that thinks that show's about cowboys and ranching, I mean, there definitely is an element of that, but it's all about legacy and family and succession and leadership. So I think it's a phenomenal series.
Great. Yeah.
So back to real topics. You talk a lot about operational clarity. What does that mean in practice, and why is it so hard for companies to maintain?
Mm, that's a great question. I find that a lot of family businesses never define clearly the roles and how things work. Again, there's like all these unspoken rules, and I know a lot of family companies who have no job descriptions. They have a very flat org chart. And some of that is like not like I said, not wanting to favor or not wanting to insult. Or one of the pros of a family business is its flexibility and being able to adapt. But it also confuses employees and confuses like whose lane is this, and you get stepping on toes. So I think it's just because family businesses tend to be a lot more informal and they like that. Like I said, they don't want to be corporate. And it often starts with one person has a great idea and they have to do everything. And that's how it is. And you bring family members in and everybody's doing everything because there isn't the money and they're building. And at some point that's not how it can go anymore, and that's where kind of the friction comes in that growing pain point. And there's multiple growing pain points, just like in life.
Speak about pain points. We talk a lot about exits and executing on an exit strategy. What mistakes have you seen family run businesses make that cost them dearly from a valuation perspective or even, sabotaging the deal?
Yeah, yeah. Most companies don't start planning early enough, especially at like, okay, we want to sell the company in 5 years. They're not like getting ahead of it at 5 years and thinking, what do I need to do over these 5 years to maximize the value of the company? So not starting early enough thinking about that. The other piece is the owner being too intertwined and being too essential. Like they have such a hard time stepping back and like trusting and delegating and letting other people do things. But if the company is based on them to keep it running, nobody's going to buy that. Right. You need to learn how to step away so they know that they can buy it and it'll still be successful. Other people I've seen, they think they're ready to sell and they may even have a great offer and then they walk away again because they haven't done that work to get themselves really emotionally ready to let go. And I've seen that both in businesses that are looking to, to sell outside of the family, as
Hmm.
well as, businesses where, the generation who's there is ready to sell, the generation is ready to buy, and then they pull out of the deal. And you can imagine what that does to the family and trust. And I mean, so yeah, those are some of the things I see, but you can never plan early enough. And a lot of people, this is the other thing, because people have received their company, like this person died and now I have this company,
Right.
and now they wanna do it different and transfer it before they're dead, thank you, but they don't know that there are, like, people out there who exit planners and people out there who can help them through that process. I had a client who said, like, "That's a thing? People do that?" And his comment was, "My dad died and I got the company," right? So, but I'm in there because there's all this, like, conflict and miscommunication now in, like, they can't even get back to the nuts and bolts of transferring, because people can't communicate well. And so, yeah, so it's that people don't always know the resources available to them to help through that process.
I couldn't agree more. And thank you for confirming things that we talk about all the time. Advanced planning is incredibly important to any exit, whether it's a family run business or not. You're going to be saving yourself, not saving, you're going to be increasing your valuation tremendously the more in advance you plan for an exit. And removing founder dependency is also really important because that is a valuation killer. If there's a, a very, very obvious dependency on the founder.
Yeah. My husband's an entrepreneur and he always says, begin with the end in mind. You start the company already knowing what you want an exit to look like, at least having some idea of that.
That's great advice. That's great advice for entrepreneurs. So speaking about advice, what advice would you give somebody that's looking to get a job in a leadership capacity in a family run business? What should
Mm.
they be asking?
So for a non-family member who's coming in to
Hmm.
they should, if it's not on the website, you should really do your homework and know that you let them know that you looked into this. But if it's not on the website, you want to hear their family story. You want to hear about what the business means to them now. You want to know what their values are, what's important to them in a leader, like in honoring those values and in representing the family, because you want to really connect on a human level and demonstrate that you can share their values and honor the legacy that they have or they're trying to build.
Good advice. Good advice. So this is my favorite part of the episode, rapid fire questions. Ready?
Boy,
One leadership trait every founder needs.
curiosity.
Love it. Biggest misconception about family businesses.
They're all dysfunctional.
A conversation every founder is avoiding right now.
Succession,
One sign a leadership team is unhealthy.
not having healthy conflict, not talking about the big issues.
Perfect segue into the next one. Best way to rebuild trust after a conflict.
Honesty, communication, being able to say, I'm sorry, and own your part of the conflict, and connecting on that mutual respect and mutual purpose.
Book every leader should read.
There's so many good ones.
You can list several.
I really like Tiny Experiments. I know there's all the ones people say good to great and things like that, but I just read Strong Ground by Brene Brown. I really liked that one too. And, I really like Patrick Lencioni's Five Dysfunctions of a Team and
Yes.
Crucial Conversations. Those two are really staples for me.
Excellent. I just started rereading Good to Great, and the first thought that went through my mind is how they were able to do this incredible amount of research without the internet and without AI.
Right? I
I
was
think,
just
wait, maybe they had some internet. I think it was written in 2001, so I would take it back. So the internet was around, but just the amount of information that they were
very
able to
little
dig
still.
up. Yeah.
I was just having this conversation with my husband about what research looked like for me in grad school and the ways we had to search on very specific programs. It wasn't the internet, it was like a program they had in school. And then we would go down to the National Library of Medicine and have to hand it to someone, and they had to get the journal. It was like a whole day thing. Yeah, it's hilarious.
Yep. So I'm enjoying it as much a second time around as I did the first. So still, it's a
Good to
classic and
know. I'll
great
have to
book.
dive into that one again.
And I'll just add to it. His latest. I'm not sure if it's when it was released, but Going Pro is another excellent book from him.
Mhm.
I'm sorry,
Mhm.
Turning Pro. Turning Pro. Great book.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Donna, thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom and advice on the show today. Greatly appreciate you giving us the time.
Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun, and it's great to talk about these things with other people. So thank you.
You're very welcome. What is the best way for people to reach out to you?
They can catch me on LinkedIn, Dr. Donna Marino, or my website, drdonnamarino.com. And my email is donna at drdonnamarino.com. So pretty easy.
Perfect.
DR for the doctor part.
Drmarino.com. We'll put all that information in the show notes. Thank you again very much. And thank you everybody for tuning in to another episode of Built to Finish. If you've this, please do like and subscribe. It does help this show tremendously. And I look forward to speaking with you on the next one. Take care. That's a wrap for this episode of Built to Finish. Thank you for tuning in. For show notes and more details, head over to podcast.stephenpivnik.com. Special thank you to our sponsor, Accresis, offering tailored, high-impact advisory services that help founders get to their finish line with a strategic acquisition or majority investor recapitalization. Catch you next week.